Okay, good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started here. I'm Stephen Ray, representing the Department of Public Safety. We'll begin with introductions down here at the end with Rob, and we'll move around the room.
Rob Dennett, representing the Iowa EMS Association.
Blake DeRucci, Iowa Homeland Security Emergency Management, 911 Program Manager.
Rob Rotter, Iowa County Sheriff, representing the Iowa State Sheriffs and Deputies Association.
Sally Hall from Iowa County 911, representing Iowa EPCO.
Rob Coppert from Cass County 911, representing Iowa NENA.
Dave Kaus, PCS Providers.
Bob Seibert, Shelby County EMA 911, representing the Iowa Emergency Managers Association.
Jack D'Angelo, Sully Telephone, representing small telcos.
Dan Halterman, Frontier Communication, representing large telcos.
Jeff Anderson, Marion County Emergency Management 911.
Diane Seaver, South Central Iowa. Susie Nesbitt, Iowa Utilities Board.
Wayne Johnson, CenturyLink, representing large telcos and alternate.
Glenn Sedley, Woodbury County 911.
Ron Gold, Westcom. Tammy Rodriguez, Iowa Communications Network.
Mike Lauer, Iowa Communications Network.
Terry McClanahan, Dallas County Sheriff's Office.
Doug McCaslin, Warren County 911.
David Jonathan, Pot County 911.
Bob Anderson, Pot County 911.
Curtis Pio, the Polk County Sheriff's Office.
Craig Allen, Statewide Interoperability Coordinator.
James Lundstedt, DHS Office of Emergency Communications.
Sherry Schmitz with Motorola.
Terry Brennan, Raycom. Dwayne Boss with Raycom.
Alice Folkwisner with the Legislative Services Agency.
Jensen Connor, Iowa HSAMD.
Okay, thank you. Who do we have joining us by phone this morning?
Brenda Vanford, Fayette County.
Morning, Brenda. Anyone else?
Greg Brooks with West.
Hey, Greg, thanks. Anyone else?
McLarnon, Page County, Iowa.
State the name again.
Marvin McLarnon, Page County 911 EMA.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, we will move forward with approval of the September 8th minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed. And approval of today's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed. Okay, State of Iowa Administrator Blake.
All right, so far we've had 4 consolidation workshops. Those have been held in Sioux City, Iowa City, and 2 in Des Moines. One of those was a vendor-specific workshop. We've had really good kind of a cross-section of the community represented at all of those. Probably around 120 to 130 people total have attended. So it has been a really well-attended and some good discussion, some good dialogue at those workshops. There is one more opportunity if you haven't attended or if you just want to attend again. That is the morning of October 24th at the Ramada Tropics off of Merle Hay in Des Moines. That's kind of in conjunction with the Iowa APCO NENA conference and program update as well. So I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in on those workshops or do that at a later time.
I could bring in, I thought I attended both in Des Moines, the PSAP consolidation workshop in the morning and the vendor-specific one in the afternoon, and I thought both were excellent. There were a lot of ideas that were brought out, and the vendor one was actually, in my opinion, was actually a very well done as far as a lot of the ideas that came out from the vendors that I hadn't really even thought about. So there was very good discussion on both sides.
Okay. Oh,
Craig Allen, State Wet Interoperability Coordinator. I attended 2 of the meetings. And I just want to remind the board that the council here is forward and as we look at these things.
Please remain focused on standards. The challenge that we're seeing, and it's not just here in Iowa, it's pretty much ubiquitous. The vendor community isn't wrong. They're not bad. They're trying to bring you a solution. But if the solution doesn't integrate with something that you can move forward with, it begins to create an island for your operation. And so we want to make sure that if we drive towards standards in our RFP processes and in the conversations that we have, it helps the vendor community better understand what our intent is. And I believe almost every vendor provides standard compliant equipment. It may not be their latest and greatest, and part of that may be because it has not yet gone through certain testing. But it is available, and as the council considers, and as Homeland Security makes their considerations, I can't overemphasize the importance of standards. It is just creeping into all of the conversations that I'm in, and I felt like it was important to bring it up. I tried bringing it up in the 2 meetings that I attended, so that the consultant at least had an opportunity to dovetail that into their report. But thank you.
yep, thanks, Craig.
Yeah, and then Craig brings up the kind of the so what of all of these workshops, and that is that our department was tasked with studying consolidation and to generate a report. So that will be what the consultants are working on after all of the workshops, after all of the survey information is compiled, and that gets submitted from us to the legislature by January 15th. So that's kind of the so what and why we're doing all of that. If there's no other questions on that, I'll continue on. So also October 24th in the afternoon is the statewide program update. I think it's maybe been called program training in the past. There's not a ton of training that goes on, but certainly some housekeeping and just some other program updates that I want to be able to provide. Mostly that audience is PSAP supervisors, but as with everything, it's certainly open to anyone who's interested in attending. There is registration for that. I've sent it out a number of times, so hopefully you've seen that. Going to just talk about some of the updated forms, some of the updated processes and procedures, especially kind of in the next gen world that we're in now, as well as some GIS updates and where we are as a state as we work towards next gen 911. Also after that, the annual forms that get sent out from our office for the PSAPs to fill out. We'll be talking about those during that meeting, so I'll send out those forms statewide to be sent in, or to be sent out, so you can get it back to us after that meeting. So we'll talk about it a little bit, make sure we cover any changes, and then that'll go out statewide for the PSAPs to submit back to us. I mentioned it last month, but maybe I almost went too fast, so I want to bring this next topic up again. Our office is in the process, and a long ways down the road, of doing a request for bid and doing contracts with the CPE vendors in the state to pay for text to 911 connectivity in all of the PSAPs. So we've done that RFB. We've gotten the responses back to the tune of about $1.5 million. We're in the contract phase. We've received one back, so we'll begin working with that CPE vendor today to start working towards text connectivity in all of the PSAPs that they represent. The other thing that I want to make sure to bring up is we put a deadline on that. It's June 30th of 2017. So we will pay for all of the PSAPs that can get done and go live on text to 911 prior to June 30th, 2017. We want to get moving on this as fast as possible. We don't want this hanging out there forever and ever. So we set a deadline. We want it done this fiscal year still. So anything after that falls back on the PSAPs, at least as of now. That's the plan. Any questions on that?
What if it's not the PSAP's fault that they didn't make it? Maybe their CPE vendor had issues or whatnot, or there's some other issue that came up.
Like I said, at this point, we're only interested in paying through the end of the fiscal year. As with everything in this industry, in this program, I'm sure there's going to be just like what you described, some issues or some outliers or onesies and twosies that we'll have to pick up. No promises. I'm sure we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But at this point, the contract even is only going to be through June 30th of next year.
Okay, I just would hate to see that a PSAP would be penalized for something that was no fault of their own.
Yeah, and noted, and it's one thing that we have internal discussions about as well, is just how many moving parts and coordination points there are in this process. It's not as easy as flipping a switch everywhere. I mean, PSAPs have to get their policies in place. We have to coordinate between all of the wireless providers, Comtech, TCS, the CPE vendors. So I think luckily, from maybe a overall management perspective, since the contracts will be with us, hopefully we can push the CPE vendors, and we have the contract with Comtech, so we'll get them in line. So then we're just working with the PSAP schedules and the wireless providers.
How are you going to let carriers know that you've got so many sites that are
Yeah, and
available?
we've had some, I'm glad we've done some of the pilot text projects that we've done, starting with the web browser. Now we have 2 on the integrated method of text to kind of work out some of those kinks. So Verizon, their text control center is Comtech TCS. So that testing is done very easily because Comtech TCS is involved throughout the process as well, because they have to do the MSRP as well. The other wireless providers use West as their text control center, and there is some coordination that has to be done there. What we've found out is basically after we've confirmed that Verizon is working, we'll go back and then coordinate with West and start scheduling the wireless providers for text testing after that initial Verizon test is done and completed.
You're going to work directly with West?
Correct. That's what we've done so far. Well, we'll still notify, like yourself, for iWireless, but we'll CC West in at the same time.
Okay.
And also notify the FCC. That's another coordination point. And then, if there's nothing else on that, finally, quarterly payments for, well, it would be the first quarter of fiscal year 2017, July through September. We'll be doing those quarterly payments next week. For the PSAPs and the service boards that are represented here, that means that will be the first check that you see the increase to 60% of the wireless pass-through, from 46% to 60%. So be looking for that, be aware of that. If you have any questions on your amount that you receive, by all means, get in touch with us. Any other questions for me? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the consolidation grant applications. Everybody's had an opportunity to review those, I take it. Was there any on here that anyone wanted to remove specifically before there was a vote?
I've got a question.
Sure, go ahead.
We have supposedly expended the 4.4 mil up through Keokuk.
Half of Keokuk.
Those that are on the waiting list, does that waiting list, if everything goes as planned and all the money is spent, do those on the waiting list, do those roll over to next year? Hopefully that we're going to get another 4.4, which that's not a truism right at the present time. But I guess, how do we handle those?
I would say no at this time. Everything that we've done, because that 4.4 is a one-year thing at this point, everything that we've done in the real process and the grant application process has been for 1 year. Again, not knowing what next year is going to look like. There's been talks, whatever, if there is a grant next year, whatever it might look like, maybe doing the prioritization a little bit differently, making it a competitive grant process instead of first come, first serve, which I would like to explore that a little bit if there is a grant, whatever it might look like. So I would say no at this point, that if those on this standby list do not get funded, They would have to reapply next year if there is a grant, whatever the grant might be.
Blake, on the, so the ones that are on the standby, would they still qualify to receive some of that money, even if it was after December 31st, but we were still supposed, they could get the project done before June 30th?
Right, that's
still
why I
be
kind of
okay?
want even the
Okay.
standby to be approved now, so our office can just be a little bit more flexible when we see there's a short, or an invoice that comes in short of what they requested, or somebody changes their mind and doesn't want to do doesn't want to do their project anymore. It rarely happens, but it
Right.
might, that we would just be able to move on those
Sure.
quickly.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and deal with the ones that are already turned in, that aren't all wait. We'll do the waiting list second. I will ask to pull DPSs, because I'm going to abstain from that vote, so we'll vote on that. But if there's no others, then I'd be entertaining a motion for approval.
Also move.
I'll second.
Okay,
Dan, I'm sorry. Me,
Bob,
Bob,
yeah.
and then Dave. Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay. And the DPS consolidation.
Is there anyone from DPS that could answer some questions regarding that?
I certainly can.
Just a few concerns that I have. One of the things I'm seeing is where we're taking equipment out and paying for its removal and transport to another location where it will evidently sit indefinitely. It kind of sounds like it's maybe just getting rid of it, perhaps. I don't know if we've ever paid for anything like that. I don't know that we've ever paid anything for bathroom fixtures. There's just some things in there that just are a lot different than what we're used to, and I just wonder if we should discuss some of those items.
Sure. Well, what we submitted was an entire proposal for the entire consolidation project, which does include physically closing one location and going to another. I know that there was a quote in there from Emergitech for eventually removing the equipment from the Atlantic Comm Center. That at this point in time is a little bit up in the air. It may very well get moved to Storm Lake, but if we don't have the area there to put two more positions, then that likely would be moved to another location, more like at JFHQ. But again, that was just put in as part of the overall, the equipment for 4 new positions, and along with the dispatch console, which actually is higher than the one that's in there, because we actually got, they were incorrect on the quote. Most of that stuff that would normally be paid for, it's still going to basically be covering that. So if the concern is about like some of the remodeling that has to be done in there to make this happen, it's pretty clear to me that the cost of the 911 equipment and those things associated, which we normally do pay, will pretty much encompass that request beyond what we would pay for the remodeling. And we know that we have to pay some of that ourselves. In fact, we were asking for that money.
Yeah, that was going
Yeah.
to be my follow-up question,
Yeah.
so thanks
Yeah.
for answering that.
Yeah. Questions?
Well, along those same lines, I shared this with a couple of my service board members, and the concern that we have, and I've talked with a few other people in APCO and NENA, is that a year ago, the Department of Public Safety applied for a carryover grant in the amount of $99,544 to put that Emergitech system in at Atlantic. And now it appears that the phone sets or the soft phone sets are going to be sent to Des Moines State and the backroom equipment stored. And as I recall, that system was installed and went live probably 2 or 3 months before we did, and we went live towards the end of March of 2015. So a system that's been only live for less than 2 years, and we're buying a replacement for that system, there was a lot of concern about that. And in fact, one of my representatives was my service board was pretty upset at the fact that that's happening, and said if we do end up paying for another one, he was going to write a complaint to the governor's office for misuse of funding. There is no reason why, in my mindset, our mindset, a lot of other people's that I've talked to mindset, that the calls that Atlantic State can't be transferred to Des Moines State, and that system that's in Atlantic moved to Storm Lake and installed in Storm Lake, and then additional equipment added at that time up there to bring it up to what you want with this new grant. So there was that consideration. It seems to be a waste of nearly $99,000 to have a less than 2-year-old or around 2-year-old system be mothballed, and I guess I would agree. And I'll tell you now that because of that, I will vote no on this application. The second thing, along with Sheriff Roder, was the construction costs. We had a remodeling project as well a couple of years ago, and brought it up to Blake's predecessor, and I knew what the answer was, but my commission asked me to get an official answer from Barb at that time regarding remodeling costs, building costs, things like that. And that was an absolute no, that wireless funds could not be used for that. And so the only way that I will vote yes on this application is if those two projects are removed, and the only thing that is funded are the furniture in the amount, I believe is that correct? Is that correct, Steve? $25,787?
That's a little low.
Okay.
We actually got an updated one since the application came in. It's about twice that.
So, I mean, I'm sorry to have to say that, but that's my locals' feelings, and some of the people that I've also talked to elsewhere around the state, their feelings as well, is that this is while this is actually a very worthwhile project, don't get me wrong, what you're requesting is not really fiscally worthwhile, especially when we've spent almost $100,000 2 years ago for that equipment. It's going to get mothballed.
Yeah. Well, the equipment that's in Atlantic, it wouldn't be mothballed. It would be still utilized. The thought process here is that unfortunately it is not just as easy for Des Moines to just take over Atlantic's area for a while. You know as well as I do how busy that area of the state is for them. And Des Moines already covers 75% of the state. I don't have enough staff there to take on any additional work. So the premise is that it's very difficult to even think that you could have a comm center open up 24/7 and take over the entire southwest corner of Iowa plus the northwest corner of Iowa and not have 4 functional positions ready to go. And that the ones that are already down there, if they weren't going to be utilized in Storm Lake, which I'm not saying yet that they could not be, because there's some idea that perhaps 2 more consoles could be put in where the current dispatch is now, because it's all going to be moved into that bigger center part there in Storm Lake State Radios where the new comm center will be. It would be used there, and if it couldn't, then we have space in Des Moines for it to go to be utilized, whether it's for backup or whatever, because the consoles that were at Fairfield are now at JFHQ. and they have no radio equipment or phone equipment at them at this moment. So they would still be put in a location, either place where they'd still be utilized if they needed to be. I can understand the issue relating to the cost of the facility. I get that. The only thing that I would throw out for people to remember is that this recent legislation that was passed wanting consolidation, it is still the opinion of the Department of Public Safety that consolidation means that they want to see a reduction of PSAPs. DPS is doing that. This is one, the only one I've seen so far of all the applications that come in. The rest are all virtual. Now, I'm not saying that virtual is wrong. I'm not saying that it's right. But the idea and the intent is a reduction of PSAPs. We've already done it once, which we'll get no credit for, and that was closing Fairfield a year ago. And within a year, Atlantic's going to be closed. So we are reducing our PSAPs. So naturally, there's going to be costs associated with any type of remodeling or anything else. I don't know that that was really specified in the legislation. In fact, I don't think it really was as to what could or could not be used regarding consolidation money. It just said consolidation. And it's been determined to be virtual or physical, so.
The one thing that I would add to all of this discussion, and we've talked about it internally as well within our department. From our perspective, when you look at administrative rules, a PSAP has to be 24/7 to be considered a primary PSAP, taking 911 calls, direct 911 calls. Storm Lake currently doesn't do that. So our perspective is that this is a flip-flop of PSAPs, of primary PSAPs. So right now there's 113 primary PSAPs, of which Atlantic is counted, but Storm Lake is not. So from our perspective, as far as payment of surcharge dollars, we're still remaining at 113. We're not seeing that decrease to 112, and fully acknowledging that DPS pays for 5 somehow. It's not through surcharge. And we fund 3 through surcharge. So just wanted to add that as well, and everything else that has been discussed, we've talked about as well. We'll continue to have those discussions. We are hoping to get guidance or an opinion of the council as a whole. On one hand, I completely understand what you're talking about with furniture. On the other hand, I could consider that or call that the match dollars. That would be funded through other DPS dollars. So I see all of that perspective. Even after this vote, if it comes to a vote, we'll still continue to have that discussion and decision internally.
Okay. Any other questions on it?
Steve?
Yes.
I just wonder, for clarification, you indicated that the cost of the council furniture was actually more than what shows in this application. I wonder if it wouldn't be wise to ask you to revise the application and remove the elements that are not eligible for funding. Even though the grant parameters don't talk about too much what's eligible and not eligible, 34A outlines 2 things that are not eligible for surcharge, and that is buildings and personnel. So even though it's not within this specific piece of legislation, there's wording elsewhere that directs what the surcharge can be used for. So the building costs just can't be eligible. I'd like to see a revised application. And I also agree with Blake. To me, this represents a move. It certainly is operationally beneficial for all of us, and DPS in particular. But currently, Storm Lake is not a PSAP. They don't receive surcharge. So I have a little concern about that.
Yeah, the 24-hour facility at Atlantic obviously would become the 24-hour facility in Storm Lake when it's unplugged and plugged back in up north. So we can certainly, I've got it. It's not with me right now, but we certainly have the updated quote from Rightline on the equipment, which is significantly more that's in there. So we'd certainly be willing to resubmit that along with the 911 equipment. cost. So if that's the general consensus, then we will take that back and do that.
I assume that we would keep the DPS in the order that it was given right now. We're not going to take them out of order, because, I mean, essentially, if you pull it out, are you going to the back of the line? I think we need to discuss that as to how we're gonna do that if we do resubmit.
Yeah. I guess that would be Homeland Security's.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, when we're there, becomes a kind of a nightmare, because anything that you would do to change that dollar amount also impacts Keokuk, which, by the way, we just approved. Keokuk's application was the last one, and it's actually getting split. Half of it is approvable. It's under the $4.4 million cap. The other half is on the standby list.
Right.
My normal stance or guidance would be, once it's submitted, once it gets to this point where the board has had a chance to review it, it's locked in as far as adding cost. Removing cost is easy. Adding cost has secondary and tertiary impacts.
Yeah. The quote that we have, if we just submitted the furniture and the 911 as is, and even if we took out that small amount that's the moving of the equipment, I think that would actually reduce the asking than what we already have right now, because you wouldn't have the building stuff in there. So I actually think it would be reduced, just quick in my head, probably around 20-some thousand. So,
Which would then afford more money towards Keokuk County then?
That would be correct. If it was ultimately, if the DPS one were to be ultimately approved, that is correct.
Unless there's any more discussion, we'll certainly do that, and it'll be.
Well, Steve, I'm going to reiterate again. I mean, on this quote, it does say that additional removal of the IP 911 equipment rack and transport to Johnston for storage. And in parentheses, it will not be restored to operation. And that backroom rack equipment is the bulk of a 911 system. The two that you're moving to Johnston are the workstations, and that's basically just a computer and a monitor and a handset, or the interface to hook to your radio is minor compared to the backroom equipment. The fact that it says there it will not be restored to operation is what we've got to go by, and it's just going to sit there. Whether or not it can be used as a backup or not, I think that if I were to go out and spend $100,000 on backroom equipment just to sit in my back room, I think my constituents, the people that I represent, would actually be in Cass County, would actually be in arms at the waste of that money. Even with the 911 on there, I will vote no on this. And I'm sorry to say that, because I agree, this is a worthwhile project. It's a physical, maybe not lowering of the PSAPs as far as a true PSAP is concerned, but it's certainly lessening the amount of dispatch centers in the state of Iowa. And I think it's a worthwhile project, but that 911 equipment is a crux of concern with us.
Well, I on that, I kind of disagreed a little bit on what it would eventually be used for. To me, it would still be utilized. It wouldn't be put in storage, but I guess with respect to that, we could easily also have Emergitech redo the quote for 2 positions, and what 2 positions would have to be new and put into Storm Lake, and then with the assumption that at some point we just simply have to move these 2 up there. So then there'll be 2 additional. So that'd cut this cost about half, from 200 down to probably about 100. It was about 100,000 for 2 in Atlantic, so I would assume it'd be 100,000 up there. So again, that would reduce the amount of asking.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
what has been our past practice the precedents that we've set with, and I think we can only draw upon the surcharge applications. I don't remember a time when we've asked someone to go back and alter their application and resubmit it. I believe we've exercised some line item vetoes of saying, we don't believe this is eligible expense, and have stricken those from an application, but I don't recall asking someone to resubmit an application, which is a bit of a concern for me. I think as the council, I think we can exercise that line item veto with you and strike a portion of it that people may be uncomfortable with. I'm a little concerned about establishing a precedence of, well, we don't like this, take it back, resubmit it, we'll approve it.
Mhm.
Does anyone
Yeah, I
remember a
would-
time when we've done that?
No, no.
Well,
Certainly makes sense to me, I guess, yeah.
Especially in a first come, first served basis that we're in right now. It does make it a little bit unfair for Keokuk County, who has a pretty straightforward grant application.
Right.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Speaking to that same topic, all of these applications are unique. They're all very different. I don't have a problem at all asking DPS to defer this and come back with a cleaner application that's more defined as to what's eligible and what's not. I'm not afraid to create a new precedent, because that's exactly what we're doing here, is each individual stands on its own. So a new precedent might be good to set.
Okay. Well, I will leave that up to all of you to make that vote, to how you want to vote, so.
I have a
Mr.
question on, oh, hang on, sorry. I have a question on procedure. Where are we? Do we have a motion yet?
No, there's
For
no
DPS,
motion.
we don't.
There's no motion.
No
There's been
motion
two
yet.
ideas put out. One is
Right,
line
okay.
item, one is send it back. So-
Yeah, the reason I asked is so we didn't pile a motion on top of a motion.
Right.
Kind of got
So
lost.
that's
Thank you.
up to everybody, how they want. Somebody's gonna move forward.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'll make a motion that the DPS application be returned to DPS for clarification and vote at the next council meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I abstain. All in favor, or opposed, same sign. Okay, we will get that updated and get that turned into Blake ASAP.
I guess, and perhaps maybe I should have asked this question before we voted, but the clarification on Sheriff Rodder's question is does this keep the DPS application in line where it is currently with the other applications and its status in front of Keokuk and the other three that are in standby, and any more that might be coming up in standby, or does this send it back to the end? I guess I should have asked that before the vote, but.
Well, I think that, that's something that Blake has to, I mean, you said no and no additional money, but obviously what's being discussed here, it's going to lower the amount.
Yeah, somehow I think we got put in even a worse position than we were on this one coming into it. I don't know.
Well, if that's something that we can turn in what the council has recommended to you, and if that's something you want to discuss with your administration, then you can let us know and let the council know.
Do you want a recommendation from the council?
Like I said, normally once the applications get to the point where they're sent to the council for their review, it's either approved or not approved. If the money goes down, great, you're getting what you send us invoices for. With a waiting list here, it's not super fair that this application is gonna be in flux for a while now, and those other ones are just on hold. I think my preference is that it goes to the end of the wait list. If you were to pin me down for an answer right now.
Okay. As yeah, Craig, go ahead.
Piece of information that showed up for me that was very demonstrable in this discussion, and I guess I need an understanding from the council, and more importantly, Homeland Security. If a dispatch center operation does not operate 24 hours a day, they're being handled differently than one that does. That's news to me. There's a lot of places across the country that don't run 24-hour-a-day operations and roll over part of it to their neighbor, cost containment, people off. Does that happen if Atlantic has to go, 3 people off with illnesses and you have to roll over 4 hours a day to somebody else next door? Does that now make it not a PSAP because it rolled over to its subordinate or backup? How do we, I guess, do we have a rule that says that? Is it written? Great, I'm excited to hear that. Where do we find that? And that certainly has then implications, if you will, for the board as we look at the interoperability components and prioritizing the work and effort that the board takes on. And so that's the reason for me coming forward here is that was the first time I had heard discussion about something less than. You can run 20 hours a day, and I suspect that because the sheriff's offices do most of the dispatching and they have a jail, that they gotta have 24/7. But if you have a place that doesn't have that requirement and they operate 18 hours a day, then they are not considered a PSAP, or not considered a dispatch center, or not considered public safety. What's the discriminator?
It would not be considered a primary PSAP. And it's an administrative code that it has to be 24/7 and receive direct 911 calls. The capability of receiving direct 911 calls.
So it's part of the administrative rules for Homeland Security?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. And though we only pay surcharge on primary PSAPs then. So, it's a discussion. I know that even at the legislative level, there's legislators that think Black Hawk County has 3 PSAPs. They're counting University of Northern Iowa.
But they're not open 24/7.
From our perspective, they're not a primary PSAP. Now, granted, somebody has to pay for that, but it's not coming out of surcharge, so we're not recognizing it as a primary PSAP. And your greater point is well taken as well. As we're looking at consolidation, completely understand that going 18 hours a day or closing overnight might be a bridge to greater consolidation. Completely understand, and our directive to the consultants with the report has been, let's look at that, and if we need to change that ultimately, let's do it, or come up with something that's better or that works better for what we're trying to achieve. But what's on the books right now is it has to be 24/7.
So I'm glad you picked up on my point. The point is that as we looked at virtual consolidation and the conversations that I had with a number of people, some of them sitting behind the counter, are that you can, in a virtual environment, have the same number of buildings, use technology to allow you to accommodate for a variety of challenges that occur in a 911 center, and offload the traffic during some number of hours. So, as an example, Group A has 7 employees. Group B has 7 employees. As their shift schedules work out, by randomness, you end up with 2 people working on a shift when you don't necessarily need them, and another one has 1 person working and they call in sick. This center, in a virtual environment, literally offloads the calls, the CAD, the digital logging recorder, the radio traffic, everything goes to system B. That's virtual. The callers know no difference, the responders know no difference. It virtually occurred, but that center has now been closed for 8 hours. And if that person is on the schedule 4 different times in the following week and they're off sick, that center is closed for 8 hours during that time, or the center is paying overtime for someone to come back in. And so the beauty of virtual consolidation is you don't have that overtime cost of having to bring someone in to cover, and you have the opportunity to cover those costs with someone else out of slack time because they have 2 people sitting. So it could be in this arrangement, day 1 it goes to center B, day 3 it goes to center D, day 4 it goes to center Q. It doesn't matter where it goes in the virtual arrangement because all of the information follows it where it goes. That's the virtual. That's, I mean, to me, that was the path that you all were on. That's why I got a little confused when we were talking about what centers and how that arrangement work. I realize it's after the vote, but I think as we look at this, your definitions probably are going to need tweaked. But thank you for your time.
Thanks. So I'll just throw this out. I know you guys just had the vote, but with the question that came up to Blake and putting him in that position about decide if, and I appreciate, Bob, your motion to maybe set a precedent, but in an effort to for me to at least protect the interests of whom I'm representing, and if it would make it cleaner for Blake, I would certainly much rather than go to the end of the list, rather have a decision made to Blake today to what you don't want in that application, and then let us move ahead from there. So, and I guess considering that Blake's been asked this question, it's a decision that still needs to be made by council for recommendation.
So can you clarify this with costs specific?
I can clarify
and
that if the
remove?
concern is about moving what the equipment is in Atlantic, obviously the idea that we needed 4 positions was because you cannot shut down one center and then automatically say, okay, it's all 24/7 up here and you only have 2 consoles. You got to pretty much have your equipment in place before you pull the plug. So that was the whole idea behind that. But if there's so much concern about having the 2 positions not being utilized, which they would be, but they may not be in that location, but they might be in Des Moines, then I guess at the end of the day, if you're not happy with that, then I guess if you can only say we're only going to approve 2 positions, we're not going to approve the moving expense, you're not going to approve anything relating to the building, and I could provide an updated thing on the console costs, and as I said, it's about 35,000 more than what's listed there. But even at that, the cost would be what? We'd go from 155 right down to 80. 80,000 would be our asking rather than 155. Just on the equipment and the furniture alone.
Could you do that without having to pull the application?
I think this would speak to Rob's thing earlier, that this would be just you guys line iteming what you want taken out and approve, and then and for me, I guess I'd rather face that dilemma than to be put at the end of the list and not get it at all.
But what about Blake's concern about adding equipment, and we're adding $35,000 from the right line furniture? And when we say console, that's the furniture console, not the actual radio console, just for clarification. For the actual furniture, we're adding $35,000 that we haven't seen a quote for. So
Right.
there's that issue.
Well, then I guess I was looking at that different. I was thinking that Blake didn't want anything going over the request that's currently there, but still, even with that revision, it'd come in much lower. So,
And I remember at the end of last fiscal year with Osceola County, we were working through the meeting to get an updated quote from a vendor on behalf of the 911 coordinator. I don't know, Stephen, if you have that quote literally sitting in front of you.
I know that I don't, but our chief technical engineer does have it. And it'd be a matter of just getting it emailed to you yet
To
today.
reiterate or maybe move things forward, whatever the council decides to do, like I said, is we're going to take under consideration and still ultimately, and it might even be a director, it probably will be a director scouting level decision, basically just regarding the status of how are we going to do this with a part-time PSAP and a full-time PSAP and a flip-flop, or what does he want to do, or what is his interpretation? So, like I said, whatever we come up with, don't necessarily consider it a final decision.
Right.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Is DPS one PSAP with multiple locations or multiple PSAPs?
Well, in our view, we're multiple PSAPs. We only have 4 out of the 5 that are open 24/7. Storm Lake's the only, well, I'll take that back. 3 out of the 5. Cedar Falls and Storm Lake are not open 24/7. And they do not receive any surcharge funding because of that. Cedar Rapids, JFHQ, and Atlantic do.
And is all that handled internally, that if a center's not operating 24 hours a day, guessing Des Moines may pick that up, and that it's still all under the auspices of the Department of Public Safety, and how you operate those remote locations is still all under the purview of DPS.
Right. Yep.
You know if there's multiple FCC IDs for the multiple locations?
Yes, there would be, because each location has different towers and all that stuff they're talking of. They're all encompassed under basically DPS, but each station obviously from the beginning had their own licensing for the particular towers they were talking on before we went global here a few years ago.
No, not FCC licensing. I'm thinking FCC PSAP IDs.
Oh yeah, they all each have individual ones. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Just curious.
Even the ones that aren't 24/7 still do. Yeah. And so as far as the equipment, if as I said, I would much rather be able to keep the application in queue. So even if your idea is that you don't want to have the increase considered, that we could still submit it, and that can go to Blake, and his Homeland Security can make that decision as to whether they're going to cover that or not.
So is this boiling down to, do we even have a mechanism if we wanted to alter something? Because there's been a motion and we've voted already. It's now just whether the council wants to make some recommendation to the program manager
Right.
as to what to do, right?
The only reason that I brought that up, again, realizing we've already had a vote, but the only reason I brought that up was because the question was posed to Blake, well, where does this put us? And if it puts us at the end of the line, then prior to the vote, with what you were bringing up, I would have much preferred to have at least line items so that we were not taken out of queue.
Right.
As it stands today, how does that application, what's the status of that application right now?
Status is it's sitting here waiting. It was sitting here waiting in queue to be approved, as is. But if we were to do what Rob had suggested initially before the vote, would it be to line item, then obviously that's what I would have preferred, so that we didn't.
In other words, we could approve this pending the deletion of things that are not eligible to be funded?
Yeah, well, from what I'm hearing.
Would that be the way it would go now?
From what I'm hearing here is that the concern about any building costs, you'd
Yeah.
want that to not be part of it. That wouldn't be approved. If the concern was about the extra consoles that are already there and were already purchased, you could say, you know, if it was that you're only going to approve 2 positions and not 4, and whether or not you want to just keep the furniture quote as is and won't accept anymore, or if you will. Either way, the cost is going to be probably about half what you see on the application now.
Well, the way it stands right now, then you're open for a motion, is that correct? One way or the other?
You could do that, and again, I asked for this consideration because it put Blake in a spot where so I figured that at least it would allow it to be in queue. He could still go back and ask if there'd be any reason why this couldn't be approved, even though it was brought up about it not being a 24 PSAP up there and we're just flip-flopping. That may have to be a director issue.
Would it be, if we want to move forward, the original motion, I made the original motion and it was voted on. Can we do a reconsideration of that motion and then move forward with a line item recommendation? Would the council members be agreeable to that?
Mr. Chairman, may I
Yeah.
make a suggestion? Before we dig this hole any deeper and complicate it even more, let's refer to Mr. Dennert, who has a Robert's Rules of Order, which is what I believe we follow, to see the proper procedure for, if you will, undoing a motion or moving forward. And since we are in the eyes of a public meeting, and I would prefer that we do it correctly.
Right.
And not make it any more complicated. And then if we want to undo it, see what that procedure is, if we agree, then maybe move forward with a suggestion. And by all means, I'm not trying to take over your position. I'm just trying to
Well,
not get it any more
I
complicated.
understand, Mike, but that's what I'm sitting here trying to do. I'm asking, someone has to move forward to change the motion, or Bob would have to change. That's what I'm sitting here waiting to be done.
Okay, so I would ask that we at least refer to Mr. Dennert and Robert Rule of Order to see the proper procedure.
And not just because my name is Robert. There is a motion to rescind. It's used when an assembly wants to annul some prior action and it's too late to reconsider the vote on it, which I think is exactly our case. It can be done regardless of any time that has elapsed, so it would be a motion to rescind previous action from Robert's Rule of Order, second edition.
Well, I would make a motion to rescind our previous motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
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 I abstain. Opposed? Okay. Back on the floor.
Well, I think I would be in favor of entertaining a motion to allow this grant application to be line itemed so that at least you can move forward. I think that's the most fair we can be to DPS as well as Keokuk County. We don't change any orders as far as our application submissions went. So that, I don't know if you want more discussion, but I think that's the right thing to do.
And you'll just have to specify what you don't want.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I've worked on this yesterday and I did a spreadsheet on this particular. But this is using, just present quotes that was in the application itself. To keep in the right line console, There's questions about, I did not have, I did go back on the master contract and look for the, like, 2 positions. But there was a difference between, what Emergitech had bid for 4 versus what was on your quote, because I think it was 124,000, and versus the 142 that was on the bid there. So I did go ahead and leave all that in there. I did remove all the, about moving the equipment and the equipment rack that was going to be put in storage and not put in operation again, and moving the 2 workstations to Johnston. I removed that, and I removed all the remodeling for the Storm Lake call center. I came up with a, this was the total though for 4 workstations. I came up with a total project cost of $239,287.61. 50% of that's, well, it would be $119,643.80. So the difference between the original asking, which was $155,156.30, and then versus the 119 now, that actually put $35,512.50 back into the pot, I guess we'll refer to that as. Which then, that would fund the rest of Keokuk counties entirely. And it would allow for some to go on to the number 1 and the number 2 that are on the pending list. But again, it's a decision of whether whether you want 4 workstations or 2 workstations. Because I think I did have the master contract here.
Well, in the way that it,
For 2, it was Emergitech 2, 92,000.
yeah, that's about right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I saw that.
Right.
Because there was a difference there.
Yeah. Yep. And obviously that question's been raised by Rob, so I mean, obviously, we would only be then looking for the 2, I guess, 2 positions.
And that would also change probably their second-year maintenance quote that was on there for 4 was $14,000. And I don't know what that would be for sure.
It'd roughly be probably 60% of that, I'd imagine.
So are we looking at just striking, I'm not looking at you, Stephen. Are we, as a council, minus Stephen, looking at just striking the construction costs related to the facility? Or are we looking at also do something with the Emergitech quote? I'm back to the simplistic line item. What should a motion be? What are we striking out of this so that we can move on?
I guess I think Sally did her homework, and what she talked about and outlined with the 2 position instead of 4, I mean, that's clear to me.
We'll go on to with the 2, then what's that bring it down?
Okay, let me just take just a couple seconds here. 2 again is 92.
Well, is it as simple as saying, take out the facility, knock it down to 2 positions? I
And
trust that
utilize
the
the 2
dollar amount
positions that
will.
are currently in Atlantic that are up there for the positions 3 and 4.
I guess I'm leery of treading into how that center chooses to operate. I'm not sure that we've poured over the other applications like this to say, how does, I'll pick on Curtis, how does Polk County in their application, what are they proposing to this nth degree of, Stephen, you can have 2, but you can't have 4, and where you put them, and how they operate, and whether they're plugged in or not. we don't generally do that. I think there's a certain level of trust that what the community is turning into us for recommendation is meeting the spirit of what the legislation is, and that we're making recommendation to home or the program manager. And I'm just worried that we're to the nth degree on this, and I'm not sure we do that for the rest.
And I agree with you, Rob, but the crux of the thing here with this particular item is you're dealing with a 911 system that's less than 2 years old and was paid for entirely with carryover grant funds 2 years ago. Is it appropriate to take the bulk of a 2-year-old system out of service and put it in storage somewhere? Is that a prudent way to spend 911 wireless money in the state of Iowa? I don't want to tell Stephen or DPS or you or anybody else how to operate their PSAP, but is it when this council needs to look at what's prudent and what's not prudent as far as spending wireless 911 funds on, and certainly if you have a system that is still under warranty currently and is still current as far as the technology is concerned, is it a good idea to put it in the back room somewhere?
And the only thing I'll add to that is that quote that you're referring to, in retrospect, I wished I would have asked him to reword that, because that was not the intent of us. It wasn't going to be stored.
Well, and I understand that, and I believe you, but that's what that was what was written down there, and that really
that's not the case.
That really threw up a stoplight, saying, "Whoa, we've got to look at this. I mean, we've just paid for wireless surcharge money, just paid for a system 2 years ago, and now they want to replace it."
No.
Otherwise, I agree with Rob. As far as me telling anybody or us telling anybody what they can and can't do in their PSAP, or what they can as far as how many positions or whatever, that's not our purview at all. I agree with you.
Is this potentially spare equipment for you?
Well, we're not quite sure where the two positions are right now in Storm Lake. There's two ways we can go about this. One, we could move 2 positions up there and have 2 additional, in addition to the 4 where we're going to remodel in the center of the building. They could still be out there as backup, or if we choose to take on another area.
But even this back room equipment, could this be used as spare equipment at any of your locations?
Sure could.
Then I'll make a motion that we strike the facility portion, the construction portion of this application as it not being eligible for wireless funds, and approve the remaining.
Second that.
Roll call vote, please.
Would you repeat that, Rob, please?
We're exercising our line item to eliminate the building construction charges from their application. The remaining can stay, and approve it as is.
Can we have discussion before the vote? And I request the vote be roll call. I guess I would have been more interested in entertaining a motion along the lines of what Sally was in the middle of working on there. And I think that would be a little bit more favorable.
Any other discussion?
So I guess my question is, differences between what this motion is versus Rob is what you say Sally was working on. Is that the difference of, we're still eliminating in either one, the building cost construction part? Is that the difference of 4 versus 2? Is that the difference, or is that something, because I'm a bit confused. Sorry.
Well, that's what Sally was working on there was, you think you originally were doing the 4, but now with the
Down to
question of
2.
that, we're going down to
Okay.
2.
But the motion that Rob made was the motion that, or to do what's currently in the application for the system, which is.
That's correct.
It's for 4.
That's correct, but we have a motion and second. You've asked for a roll call vote. We're gonna do that. If it doesn't if it passes, it passes. If it doesn't pass, then somebody else can make a motion to do what.
Right, but that's the difference between.
That's the difference, yeah.
What the 4 versus the 2 is the primary difference of about round numbers. I don't need cents.
Hang on just a second. Probably about 27,800.
So something like the 90 something versus the 119. Are those the numbers? I kind of remembered.
Hang on.
Roughly.
Because of taking down, it'd be down from, the original asking is 155,156 and 30 cents. It would take it down to about 91,843 and 80 cents.
For the 2.
That's 2 positions.
Right now we've got it to still do 4.
4.
And that number is the 119 number.
Okay, hang on. Let me put that one back in.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be.
It's got to be around 200.
Yeah. Okay, hang on. 2, 1, 3. I put that one back in. That would make it back up. If it was 4, it would make it 119,643 and 80 cents. That's 50%. Original was 155, 156.30.
And what was the 2 position again? I'm sorry.
Oh, hang on. 91,843 and 80 cents. So that basically puts 27,800 back into the pool.
And then are we paying for the move or are we not paying for the move?
No.
We are not paying for the move with the current motion?
Oh, okay. Well, no,
Current
that
motion
would,
we
yeah,
are.
because it was, yes. I didn't have that. If I need to put that in there then too, if we're paying for the move.
That's another 9,000.
Yeah, so it'd be half of that. So we're talking, the total asking would be 96,343 and 80 if we put all the move.
Okay, so we have a motion and second on what Rob had, so, and there was a roll call request for that.
Okay. You ready? You want me?
I'm not. I think if we're paying for everything except the construction, I don't think the proper number is 97,000. I think it's 119 plus some number. We're talking about 4. I think our total number would be like a 125 number. I'm not good on the math, but
Be about 123.5.
So if we, according to Rob's, because we were discussing the other ones and I was giving those. So if we, according to Mr. Diddert's motion, we'd be paying for the console furniture, paying for 4 positions of Emergitech IP 911 client, paying for the move, but not paying for the facility remodel. Total project would be $248,337.61. 50% of that would be eligible, so that would make it $124,000. $168.80, according to what was being motioned.
Thank you.
Question on the floor.
Oh, yes, Bob.
Do you want to come up front, please?
Yeah.
Sorry.
As of right now, is Storm Lake identified as a primary PSAP?
No,
No. So does that make this grant even eligible?
that would be our department's chief concern.
Okay. So if this would be voted on, would that open up this grant to be eligible for PSAP? That would be a vote that you would say that this would be. Would this make this money eligible for non-primary PSAP, such as a backup center?
That's our concern.
And then also, how would that affect Storm Lake receiving surcharge dollars? If it did become, it got grant money, don't they pretty much fall in line together? So would they be eligible for?
The bottom line for us is we currently pay 113. We pay based off of 113 PSAPs. This application does nothing to change that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you ready to call?
Yeah, you
Okay.
ready for a roll call
Yep.
vote? Okay. Mr. Coppert,
Iowa Nina votes no.
Sheriff Rotter,
ISSDA votes no.
Mr. Bryant,
No.
Mr. Murphy, Mr. Seivert, Mr. Ray,
Abstain.
Mr. Dennert,
No.
Mr. D'Angelo, Mr. Halterman,
No.
Mr. Kaus,
No.
Mrs. Hall, no. Mr. Chair, the motion failed.
Okay.
I have a question. I guess hit me over the head if I'm, based on what the gentleman just brought to the podium, are we doing any kind of consolidation here? I'm sorry. Based on what the gentleman brought to the podium, is this even eligible? Are we doing any consolidation, virtual or physical? I guess I'm almost back to a primary building block. I'm just asking for, not necessarily the chair, anybody. I'm just trying to understand, because we've obviously spent a lot of time on this, but I'm not sure I'm any clearer on if we're doing.
Well, I will say.
Help me understand.
I will say on behalf of DPS, yes, we view closing of the Atlantic Center and moving all operations for the western third of Iowa to Storm Lake as a consolidation. That is our opinion.
And I think in reality it is. I think the thing that gets in the way of that is the administrative rules as they are today. And I think we just pointed out why those need to change.
And thank you. I'm just trying to understand, and I'm also trying to get ready for all this legislative session of things that everybody keeps asking, what do we need to fix and how do we do it? So I'm not trying to
Right.
do anything but.
Okay.
And I guess I would bring up one more point from Mr. Allen's comment and the discussion on the primary PSAP. And I know there's the intent and the normal and the common sense and the shells and the wills. But I mean, if we're really kind of hung up on details, so take it to the nth degree. You're normally set up, but all of a sudden you have an emergency and your calls roll over. Well, guess what? You're not a primary PSAP. So does that make you ineligible for that year because you had a problem? I mean, if we're looking at the technicals, if you're not 24/7, 365, then you're not a primary. Well, Most everybody has a problem sooner or later. So I'm just saying, if we're looking at this language as to what dictates a primary, is it the normal operation? So when the person got sick, okay, well, they got sick once, or is 2 times acceptable, or is 3 emergencies, where you have to roll your calls over? I mean, somebody's always looking for the beat you up on the exceptions. So it's something we have to keep in mind if we're going to rewrite some stuff, as well as why I bring it up. Thank you.
Okay, we got about 9 minutes left. However, before we move forward, I would be remiss if there's anyone that would still want to entertain what was talked about earlier with line item.
Mr. Chair, if it will help DPS with this application, I would vote, or excuse me, I would entertain, or I will make a motion that along the line item approach, that we approve the bid as listed here for the right line furniture, so that at least that portion of the project can start moving forward.
And what about 2 positions as opposed to 4?
I can't, unfortunately, if you had the app, if you had that, or if you could get it from your tech or whomever has the quote, I would make that entertainment or or excuse me, make that motion for the 4. However, going by what's written in front of us with this particular quote.
Well, then representing DPS, I would say you're already line item by saying you're going to vote for that. So why couldn't you line item to say you're only going to approve 2? You're already saying you're going to approve just that in the application, so you're already line iteming.
Well, this is the 2. We're talking about the furniture here.
No,
correct?
I'm talking about the 2 911 consoles as opposed to 4.
I'm talking just about the furniture.
Okay.
That's all my motion is for the right line furniture.
Right.
It is not for anything else.
It's still my opinion that you're line iteming because you're just
Yes.
saying you're going to approve that.
Yes.
And so, as a clarification for me as a department, why would you not say that we could still get 2 positions when we need them for the 911 emergency tech?
Well, we can maybe make another motion for that, or if you, or better yet, if I can, since my motion hasn't been seconded, can I take back my motion and restate it, if that would be appropriate, Mr. Parliamentary Procedure down there?
I put the book away.
You put the book away.
Yeah, well, there's no second, so you can still amend your
Okay,
motion.
I would make a motion that we approve the Iowa DPS bid or quote here to include the furniture and to include a 2-position system, 911 system, as indicated from the master contract. I believe that was for, was that the 911 system, Sally? Was that the 91,000?
92.
The 92, and that's just the 911 system? Is that correct? Or is that
That's
also
2 positions, isn't it?
Yeah, that line on across that says 92,000.
2,000 for 2 positions.
Okay. I would make a motion for that and the furniture.
Blake, is that something you could work with? You have confidence that could work?
Again, our primary concern is this does this reduce the number of PSAPs? So again, whatever we come up with here, we're going to take it under consideration, but I'm not sure it's the end-all be-all decision either. It gets us moving.
DPS would welcome the vote, but we also understand that it's contingent upon Homeland Security's decision, and they'll have to make that notification to us.
I guess I have a question. Is the furniture for 4 or 2?
It's for 4.
So I guess I would like to amend the motion. And amendment to say that the furniture will be also for 2 and I'll make 2 separate amendments. That's my first amendment.
Is there even a second?
Mm-mm.
No, there's no second. You actually really could be asking Mike for Rob to amend his
If that makes it
own.
easier, I guess, Mr. Coppert, I would like to ask you to amend your motion to include the furniture for 2 as well and consider, not amending it, but change your motion. And also to state what Chairman Ray said, that it would be dependent upon the approval of the director.
I would be willing to change my motion to that. Sorry, Sally.
Oh, gosh, thank you.
Fine job, Sally.
Just a second.
Vastly,
I'm just checking to make sure the recorder's still working.
she's vastly underpaid.
Okay.
Okay, so we have that motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'm gonna roll call this one too.
Okay.
Discussion?
Yeah, discussion.
So are we, if we're voting in favor of this, are we essentially saying that we do acknowledge them as a PSAP despite their apparent non-compliance with being a primary PSAP? Is that the essence of this? I mean, we've gone round and round on this for half an hour, if not longer. But now we're saying, okay, it's okay. We're gonna line item this thing down and half item it, and we're not even sure if it's a PSAP or not.
It would be the opinion of the Department of Public Safety that even though it does not change the amount of PSAPs, it is changing locations and closing of a facility that was going to open one up as a PSAP. Therefore, it's our opinion that it does qualify. We would accept the vote if it was to come out that way and understand that the Homeland Security may end up with a different decision.
You ready for me?
We had a second, didn't we? Second on all that?
Mike did.
Okay, okay, all right.
Okay. Okay, different. Stephen Ray,
Abstain.
Rob Dennert,
No.
Jack D'Angelo, Dan Halterman,
No.
Dave Kaus,
No.
Sally Hall, no. Rob Coppert.
No.
Mr. Chair, the motion failed.
Okay. Mr. Allen, do you have anything briefly in a minute? Okay. Yes.
Standby.
Standby.
Oh, yeah, standby. We got a motion for approval of the standbys.
I make such a motion.
I would like to actually have those voted separately. We're one of those standbys.
Okay. Was there anyone else other than yours that it would affect?
I don't think so.
So we'll just pull yours.
Okay, yeah, poll cast, please.
Poll cast. So this will be, we have a
For-
motion on this one yet?
Oh, yeah.
I had to just repeat my motion, pulling Cass.
Okay.
There was a second.
Not yet.
Second on that then, on the others?
I'll second.
Okay, motion second.
Bob?
Motion and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. Okay, and then Cass County?
So move.
Second.
Okay, motion and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed.
Abstain.
Okay.
Okay. There's really nothing else on the rest of the agenda. Does anybody have anything they want to bring up quickly before we?
I was going to make a report on my trip to APCO, but I will table that until next meeting.
Okay.
Because of the time.
Okay. All right. Well, hearing nothing else, we'll be adjourned then. Thank you.